Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Another preview episode of the podcast. We're getting ready for a Friday night game, a little Black Friday action in Sanford Stadium, number 7, Georgia. Going to be playing Georgia Tech. We're going to have GoJackets.com's Garrett Chapman on with us in a few minutes to preview this game, learn more about Georgia Tech, and see what the Bulldogs are going to be lining up against between the hedges on Friday night. Before we bring Garrett on, I want to go through just a couple quick notes a few notable developments last few days for Georgia. The first being the situation with Colby Young. Colby's been suspended from the team since his arrest on October 8th. There were reports on Tuesday that Colby was back with the team at practice, trying to get ready to see when exactly he will be able to play again. Kirby Smart talked about this on Wednesday night. Kirby said, quote, "I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about the Colby Young situation. I respect that and understand it, but it's still a pending legal matter. So Colby's competition status hasn't changed, and we don't have any timelines or really expectations on this process. He is back practicing with us and using the facilities, but that's all I can really comment on that." Kirby was asked a little bit later about it, declined to really go into further detail, referred back to his opening statement. So it's a situation. Colby Young's not going to play against Georgia Tech. I would be surprised if he plays in the SEC title game. The date to watch is December 10th. That's when he'll be back in court. It's definitely possible that those charges against him could be dropped before then. But at this point, December 10th is the day to watch. And if there's any further news on that situation, we will have it over at Dogs 24/7. So I wanted to start with that and then talk about the playoff rankings. Georgia moves up 3 spots to number 7. If the playoff started today, it would be a number 8 seed Georgia team hosting number 9 Tennessee. I think this is about where Georgia would want to be, especially understanding that they've had 2 losses this season, understanding that they had a lot of breaks go their way last weekend, week 13, with teams like Ole Miss, Alabama, losing, as well as Texas A&M, which put Georgia in the SEC title game. So I think Georgia's sitting pretty. Obviously, they've got a lot to still do, starting with Georgia Tech on Friday night, and then when they play either Texas or Texas A&M in the SEC title game on December 7th. So I think Georgia's in a good spot, and they understand that there's more to do. Speaking of that, we're going to bring on the Georgia Tech expert. We got GoJackets.com's Garrett Chapman with us to get ready for a Friday night edition of Clean Old Fashioned. Hey, Garrett, how is it going as we not only get ready for this, but got Thanksgiving right around the corner?
Oh, I'm coming to you live from beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm spending some time with some family and everybody else up here, and going to head back down to Athens, Georgia for a fantastic rivalry game. One of my favorite rivalry games of the year, and I know Georgia Tech fans are very sharing in that opinion. They love this game. It's a game on their schedule that they look forward to every single year, even if the game hasn't really gone in their favor in recent years. But look, this is a big game for them, and they are very excited for this one. I am too.
Now, we'll get into this Georgia Tech team here in a second, but I wanted to get your opinion on this game being on Black Friday, playing this thing on Friday. I think when it was first announced, I was sort of like, I don't know if I'm crazy about this idea. Now that we've gotten here, I think it's a great idea to put this game on Friday night to give these teams a chance to get a little bit of a spotlight in a series that Georgia has dominated. What do you think about the Friday night aspect of this, playing this thing on Black Friday?
I tend to agree with you. I'm still not the biggest fan of it coming in on Friday. I see the benefits of it just because you get a lot of more eyeballs. You get people who are going to be watching this game who may not have been otherwise. I think that's great. And plus, people are kind of looking for something to do on Black Friday. And I think it's going to be a good excuse for them to, excuse me. It should be a good thing for them to do on Friday nights. But it does fly in the face of all the high school football action that happens. Of course, you initially had the GHSA moving everything around to try and accommodate the TV schedule for Georgia and Georgia Tech. And, of course, the weather had other plans for that with Hurricane Helene and everything else that happened earlier in the season. So it's not my favorite thing that is happening on Friday night, but I know it opens up my Saturday, and I get to watch some awesome college football action on Saturday. So I know selfishly I'm very excited for it. But as far as it being on Friday, it's the first time since I believe like 1994 that it happened on a Friday night, and that was at Bobby Dodd Stadium. When was the last time that a game happened in Athens, not on a Saturday? I think that I saw some headline about how this is the first time in a very, very long time that they haven't played on Saturday.
Yeah, I know in 2016, I think it was that Georgia wound up having to play at South Carolina on a Sunday due to weather.
Yeah,
But
but I'm saying in Athens.
yeah, I couldn't tell you the last time. I mean, it's definitely not been in the time since I've been covering the team, and definitely, I mean, I can't think of it from the time I've been watching this team, and I've been watching them for quite a while. And maybe it is, Garrett, kind of the selfish aspect of it. I am really excited to get to watch just based on week 13. I mean, I think week 14 is gearing up to be a really wild Saturday, and really 3 or 4 days of football with the way the schedule is set up. Now, Garrett, I want to talk about this Georgia Tech team. 7-4, finished ACC play 5-3, very respectable. Got a very dramatic win over NC State to end ACC play. What's sort of the vibes around this Georgia Tech team coming into this game, and just what they've been able to do to this point in the season?
They're confident. They're really confident in what they can do and what they've been this season. It's been ups and downs, and you had the injury to Haynes King, which has been really paramount throughout the second half of their season. You had the game against Notre Dame and the game against Virginia Tech, which would have been difficult games in their own right. But when you're doing it without your starting quarterback, you're kind of hamstringing yourself in those games. And I mean, this is a confident bunch, and I know that they've kind of inherited the mentality of Brent Key in that regard. They're not ever intimidated by the teams that they're playing. They have 7 wins against ranked competition, with all of those really coming in ACC play. But you saw what they did against Miami. They if they're playing their brand of football, it can be very, very dominant on the ground. That's what they want to do. They want to ride behind that dominant offensive line that can do a lot of good things, and they don't allow a lot of sacks. They're one of the top 5 rushing offenses in the ACC, and on defense they're playing really, really good football, and they're starting to get turnovers, or takeaways, I should say. That's been kind of a different trending in the opposite direction, if you will. But this is a confident bunch, and I think coming into this game, they're not going to be intimidated by Georgia. It's a team that they really don't like a lot, and then Brent Key's talked about it. Maybe not in his press conferences, but when he does radio tours, he's been a little bit more vocal about it, and he does not like Georgia. Let me tell you that much. That's very clear.
Hey, I'll say that I appreciate seeing that. I think you need kind of that spark to this rivalry. Again, this has been a one-sided one, but it's not in the grand scheme of things all that long ago that Georgia Tech won 3 in a row right at the turn of the century. So I think you need a little spark.
He was a player too.
Exactly. And I like it just from the standpoint of trying to make this thing interesting again. I do want to say, too, for those who are watching this live, if you got a score prediction you want to throw in for this game, do it in the comments. We're going to get to that toward the end of this podcast, but I do want to rattle off what folks think is going to happen, and Garrett and I will share what we think as well. Now, Garrett, let's start with this Georgia Tech offense and talk about the quarterback situation. Obviously, we come in with Haynes King, the former Texas A&M quarterback who had played for them last year. He gets banged up, still trying to play through it, but you got Aaron Philo, who is from just right down the road, played at Prince Avenue Christian over in Bogard, Georgia. How has Georgia Tech sort of handled this quarterback situation? And specifically with Philo, what has stood out to you about him?
So the injury to Haynes King, it was tough, and it's his throwing shoulder, and it's mostly just pain tolerance. But I'm not super confident in his ability to throw the ball down the field. There were 1 or 2 instances where, when I went back and watched the game film, it was you had guys down the field. I don't know if he just missed them or if he just didn't think he could get the ball there. And Jackson Hawes, the tight end, number 85, he was running free once or twice against NC State, and Haynes King opted to take the check down. And again, I don't know if it's a health thing or if he just didn't see him. If it's a health thing and he chose to take that check down, then I'd be very concerned about that, because the thing about that 2 quarterback system that they ran, it worked to perfection. Buster Faulkner did a tremendous job calling the offense against Miami. It was smoke and mirrors, and it worked in that first game. Against NC State, it didn't really work all that well. And it didn't help that you weren't running the ball super well. Up until the final drive, you were sub 100 yards on the ground. And generally speaking, if Georgia Tech is outrushed, they don't win the game. it's just a trend for them this season. But I mean, this team with Aaron Philo under center, he's a great football player. He's got so much potential. He's the GHSA's all-time leading passer, and the dude has poise and leadership that is not common in an 18-year-old. It's something that we talked to him after the game against NC State, in the way that he talks, in the manner in which he just that leadership is tremendous, and it's not something you see, like I said, in a freshman quarterback. So if they do end up having to go to Philo, I think they'll be comfortable with that. He just kind of stays level throughout the course of the game, and that's very valuable for this team. But losing Haynes King is never going to be easy. His athleticism is fantastic. He's very quick with the ball. His decision making is tremendous. And if he is healthy, if he's able to throw the ball, this team just unlocks a whole nother level of potential because he is so fast. We did see a little bit more from Aaron Philo on the ground, especially on that final drive. He had 36 yards rushing, 2 18-yard carries, including the game-winning touchdown run. But it's not really the element of his game that he wants to flash. He wants to throw the ball. But the problem is with Haynes King, you just get a hat on a hat, and you kind of take him away. It's a less effective read option. I know Georgia fans, they know that Georgia Tech used to love the triple option, and when Haynes King's under center, it kind of turns into that sort of offense. So all you got to do is just man up, and then he can take you out of the game. But with Philo, if he's able to add that rushing element to his game, then that makes him a lot more dangerous. But he's a clutch player. He's had several. He had the game-winning drive last week against NC State, and then he had the tremendous performance that he had against Miami, and a lot of these plays that he was making 3rd and 18 or longer, where he's taking the check downs or he's making the big play, and it's been fun to watch him develop this season. But ultimately, if Haynes King is not the number one guy, I think this is going to be a really interesting start for this team. And Aaron Philo specifically too, he's a freshman, and we haven't seen him in a road environment at all this season. He's played 3 games this year, and all 3 of those games have come in the confines of Bobby Dodd. So we'll see how he does when he's in a hostile Sanford Stadium.
That's a fair point, because I think that Georgia fans are going to be really excited, try to impact this game. And Curry Smart, very complimentary of Aaron Philo, pointed out that he broke the Georgia high school all-time passing yards mark that was set by Trevor Lawrence. So, I mean, that tells you the kind of quarterback he was in high school, and I think he's got a very bright future there at Georgia Tech. Garrett, tell me about the skill players around both of these quarterbacks, the guys that that the Yellow Jackets are going to lean on when it comes to moving the ball.
Let's start. This is kind of a cheeky answer. I'm going to start on the offensive line. The offensive line I mentioned before, it's one of the best in college football. It's inconsistent in its run fits, but its pass protection is second to none. They've only allowed 5 sacks this season. Not exactly a true drop back type of passing offense necessarily. It's a lot of quick hitting and screen play and everything else, and you're going to have a lot of pre-snap motion. It's something that a lot for a defense to keep its eyes on. But that offensive line is the blueprint of a Brent Key team. He played offensive line when he was in college at Georgia Tech. He coached the offensive line, and now he's basically setting his foundation on that offensive line. So I just want to say that and just start right there. On the outside, you have Eric Singleton, you have Malik Rutherford. Malik Rutherford was dealing with some injuries against NC State. He was standing with his helmet on the sideline. He's been practicing. He's had the black shirt on throughout the course of this week. His health is going to be very important to watch. But Eric Singleton, Malik Rutherford, 2 carbon copies of the same type of player. They're a little bit undersized, but what they lack in size, they make up for in explosiveness. They can pop down the field, and they can take up a lot of yards in a hurry. And they're a fun watch, especially if you have Aaron Philo or Haynes King, if he's healthy, getting them the ball. They're at their best when they can hit 1 or 2 big plays throughout the course of the game. And I know Georgia's been susceptible in that area this year, kind of uncharacteristic for a Georgia defense. But if they're able to get got at some point throughout this game, I think that'll make this team a lot more effective on offense but they're going to be moving around. They're going to be shooting some motions a lot. Eric Singleton's been getting involved in the running game a little bit too. Both of them have tremendous speed. But at the running back position, look at Jamal Haynes. His health, it's up and down. He's a little undersized, just like his counterparts at the wide receiver position. But if he's having a good game and if he's having a good performance, then this entire offense is unlocked and they can do a lot of good things. It's just the rushing attack has been it's top 5 in the ACC, but it's very hit or miss at times this year. When they are hitting, like you're talking about 270 yards, like you had against Miami. But if they're missing, then you're talking about 64 sub 100 game performances against Virginia Tech or Notre Dame. So it's up and down. You're kind of riding that wave. But if they get that rushing attack going, that's where they become most dangerous, and that helps only helps with those two vertical seams with Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford.
With Eric Singleton, 4 receptions for 96 yards last year in this game. He made some big plays against Georgia. And I want to read you this quote from Kirby Smart because I asked him about that offensive line. Georgia Tech's only given up 5 sacks this year. I think that's second in the country. And part of Kirby's quote was that this is not a sack game. This is a strap it on, strike somebody in the mouth, keys, fits kind of game. I mean, they know it is. We know it is. No way around it. They've done a tremendous job talking about that offensive line. I think Kirby knew going into this that, Brent Key, former offensive lineman, former offensive line coach, they know that trying to get past that offensive line is not going to be easy on Friday night.
No, absolutely not. And I think that that's kind of where he's hung his hat. This is a team that it's physical, and they've, like I said in the open, when you that first question you asked me, they've embodied the mentality of their head coach, and he's a gritty, tough guy, and that's just kind of his mantra. It's what he does well, and that's offensive line play, and that's really what they've hung their hat on throughout the course of this season. And credit to him. It's worked really well, and it's kept them in a lot of football games. Outside of a couple where the game against Virginia Tech, they had other issues that were involved. That was when Zach Pyron was your starting quarterback, and he was just missing guys. You're dropping passes. It was just sort of an ugly game. But the offensive line, the defense really kept two in that game, I'll admit. But the offensive line was still finding success in that game. It's just that not a lot of other things were really working in your favor. But they paved the way to a pretty successful offense, one of the better offenses in the ACC.
Looking to the other side of the ball, Garrett, what stands out? What are the strengths of this Georgia Tech defense, and who are the names to know on that defense?
So even in a game where you take away the fourth quarter against NC State, and all of a sudden this defense was playing out of its mind against the Wolfpack. But it is worth noting that you go for $150 in the final quarter. You can't really ignore that fact. But even though they rushed for 200-plus yards in that game, Georgia Tech still has one of the very best run defenses in the ACC statistically. That's been one of their biggest points of improvement this season. Tyler Santucci, Kyle Pope, Jess Simpson, many high school football fans, they would know that name, Jess Simpson. They added him to the defensive coaching staff, and this unit has taken just leaps and bounds from what it was last year. It was very inconsistent in that regard. And when you snuff out or even just mitigate what a team is not able to do on the ground, it puts the impetus on the quarterback to make plays with his arm. And they've done that very well this season. The secondary has been up and down at times. They've been able to get God at times, but they've been fine, largely. I'd say they're kind of middle of the road in the ACC, just full transparency. But it's that the run fits that they've been able to do. They've done a really good job in that regard. And that lends itself to them being one of the very best third down defenses in college football. I think they're number 11 at something like 30% or something allowed on third downs, which, again, flies in the face completely of what they were last year when you have losses to like Bowling Green and teams like that, where you just couldn't get them off the field, and they've done that. They've done a very good job this year of getting teams to third down and then getting them just off the field entirely. And that starts with first and second down. And if you can snuff out the rushing attack, it helps a lot. The other big thing that and highlighted that is Cam Ward, what they did to that Miami team. They dominated Damian Martinez on the ground. Cam Ward obviously is going to go get Cam Ward things. He's probably the most prolific quarterback in college football this season. If he's not number one, he's right there up there with Jackson Darton. All the others right there. But no, this team, take a look at Romello Height. He's been playing really good football here as of late. I want to say 2.5 sacks or so for him. He has an interception that he almost took the distance, very nearly took the distance against NC State. And then he has a forced fumble. And look, he's been doing a really good job. He's been creating a lot of havoc here over the last couple of weeks. Kyle Eifert, he's been dealing with some injuries. He's the guy that you want to keep an eye on. It's hard to miss him. He's got that beautiful shoulder pad. That's what a linebacker should look like. take a look at Kyle Eifert, and he's a lot of fun. He's a rocket, and that dude is shot out of a cannon. Every single time that ball is snapped, he is somewhere getting a hat on the ball. He's been dealing with some injuries here over the course of the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, he got hurt right at the same time that Haynes King got hurt. So they've been kind of dealing with that. But Trinilius Tatum, guys like that, they've stepped up in his absence. Another one, EJ Lightsley. I know that you guys are all very familiar with EJ. He had a pretty strong game against NC State. He's been picking up a lot of the slack. Played his best game of the season, I think, against Miami. But he did have a pick six on a wild, wonky play against NC State. But no, that's another one. Then the secondary, Lamiles Brooks, he's going to be the key cog on that unit. So he's really one of the emotional leaders of this defense, and good player, really good player, and I have a lot of respect for him. Clayton Powell-Lee is the other one right there.
Now, how would you categorize Georgia Tech's special teams this year? I was looking through the numbers. Doesn't seem that great. I mean, are they on shaky ground? Just how would you describe their special teams?
Kind of like the rushing offense, and it's just a lot of this. Aiden Burr has been solid at times, and he's been very bad at others. And look, he started the season kind of shaky, right? And that right hash mark, especially, he was missing kicks from, and he's been very good since then. And he had some big kicks against NC State. He's had some big kicks throughout the course of the season. He's solid now. I think he's kind of bucked a lot of that trend, and then Brinky talked about it. We asked him about it, I think, after that NC State game. And he said that, like, they've been putting an emphasis on that in practice, and they've lined him up. They've had the whole team circled around him, and he missed some of them, but they kept at it, and they said, hey, we're going to lift you up and work here for you. And it was a kind of a good moment for him. And then he started kind of building it up, and kickers are kickers. They're going to do what they got to do. And the mental game for them is huge. And I think Aiden Burst kind of bucked a lot of the negativity. But one thing that you do need to keep an eye out for, like Zeke Biggers and the rest of these guys on that defensive unit, when they're lining up for field goals or extra points or whatever, they love to get back there and block some kicks. And they've got some size right there. And you want to talk about an emotional swing. There's not much more of an emotional swing that you can have than blocking a kick. They've done that really well this season. I think they've had 4 or 5 of those this year. So keep an eye out there because that could be a potential momentum type of swing in this game if you can get back there and block a kick.
No doubt about it, and especially if you're on the road, there's no way to quiet a crowd than block a kick and then maybe do something with it. We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about this matchup specifically, but I also want to make sure and mention, hey, there's the Black Friday sale going on both at Dogs247 and GoJackets.com. Be sure to take advantage of that if you're a Georgia fan. Dogs247, Georgia Tech, GoJackets.com. Take advantage of this on the Georgia side. We have Georgia getting ready to go back to the SEC title game in a good position to make the college football playoff. You want to sign up for that. You want to sign up. National Signing Day is a week from when we are recording this. You want the transfer portal drama. You want potential coaching carousel stuff. A great time, no better time, I would say, than to sign up, get 75% off a VIP membership. It is definitely worth the money. We'll take a quick break, come back, and talk a little bit more about this matchup. All right, Garrett, looking to Friday's game, and I just want to say I have managed to not say Saturday. I've really – it's been hard.
You're better than me. You're better than me. I've said it several times. I probably said it on this podcast once or twice, honestly.
So looking at – it's a very easy thing to do, and we are late in the season. But looking at Friday's game, what has the conversation been like from Brent Key, from the players you guys have spoken to, just about this matchup, about what they see in Georgia and the opportunity they feel like they've got going into Sanford Stadium?
I said it before. I mean, like this team hates Georgia, and I don't know who the reporter was, bless his heart, but he came in and he was asking questions about Georgia, and you could tell there's a mood shift in the room when the Dogs are brought up in front of this team. And Jamal Haynes specifically, and I tweeted this out at GChapATL if you want to go check it out, but shameless plug there. But if you, he was asked that question. It's like something about like the mentality of it and like whatever, like the passion that you do share the passion of your head coach when you're playing Georgia. And you just said, plain and simple, the hell with Georgia. That's it. Didn't answer anything else. That just speaks to the mentality of this team going into this game. It'd be a feather in the cap of Brent Key. I mean, this is a must-win game for Georgia. Obviously, you talk about their playoff implications. I'm a radio guy, too. I work for Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as well. So we've been talking about the implications for this game for a very long time. And for Georgia, you have to win this game if you want to get through and be an at-large bid to the college football playoff. And when I tell you, Brent Key and this team would love nothing more than to just throw a monkey wrench into that and just screw up their season. They would love it. They would love it. And they've done a very good job specifically of being that confident bunch and just hanging around in football games, specifically with Brent Key at the helm. They do a good job. So there's a lot of confidence heading into this game. And they know who they are. They have a strong identity. And they're a tough physical bunch. And they're not afraid of getting into a backyard brawl with Georgia.
Garrett, it is so funny that you just said backyard brawl because I'm going to have a column on Friday. And the way this thing sets up, if Georgia's not careful, is basically going to be the point of the column, is it reminds me of West Virginia Pitt when West Virginia had a chance to
How about that?
Go to the national title game, and they lost 13-9 to a Pitt team that West Virginia fullback Owen Schmidt, and I'm censoring this, I'm cleaning it up, said was the crappiest freaking football team. And just you know the rivalry piece of this and the opportunity Georgia Tech has to ruin Georgia's season. And now I say that Georgia could, if they lost, respond, win the SEC, and get that automatic bid. But you definitely put a lot of pressure on Georgia if you were to lose this game. So no, I just thought that was fitting because that's what I'm looking at is like Georgia has to take care of business because Georgia Tech has had a really good season. It would have a great season if it was able to beat Georgia. Yeah,
no, this is a team you can go 1-11, but if that one win, it's kind of a cliche, obviously, but if you go 1-11 and that one wins against Georgia, that's a successful season for these guys. I mean, to hell with Georgia's literally in their fight song. They say it, and when they're singing their fight song and everything in the stadium, that's the part where it always gets loudest. Like this team, this fan base, everybody here, they cannot stand Georgia, and I mean, to win this game would be tremendous for them. But there is a path to victory for Georgia Tech, and if you're talking like specifically X's and O's and what you can see on the field, more than just the emotional side of it, there is a path to victory. Like they could win this game, they could at least come in and muck it up and make it an ugly game and very uncomfortable for Georgia. I more expect them to make it really uncomfortable and maybe come up a little bit close. Just there's still a talent discrepancy between these two teams, but they're going to be ready to go. And they've had this game scheduled and circled, and they had the extended rest, which I think might also lend itself into Georgia Tech's favor in this game. They played on a Thursday night, so they had Friday and Saturday on top of everything else as far as their preparation was concerned.
Yeah, and looking at it from the Georgia perspective, not only did they play Saturday, which it was an early game, but they wound up having the starters in against UMass a little longer than I think they anticipated. So I don't think that completely flips this game, but it's definitely not in Georgia's favor. Now, Garrett, when it comes to Georgia Tech and going into this game, what are the injury situations for us to watch? Who are the guys that we're not 100% sure if they're going to be able to play for the Yellow Jackets on Friday?
They're largely healthy. It's more guys that are just banged up. Quarterback position, I mentioned Haynes King earlier. Can he throw the ball? What is his status? You got to have a healthy Haynes King. He's going to get snaps in this game. Don't get me wrong. He's going to get snaps, and they're going to try to see how it works. But if he can get going early and if he can actually throw the football, I think they're going to try to complete passes with him at some point. Believe it or not, I mean, he's attempted 9 passes and he's completed all 9 of them. A lot more of that has to do with the fact that there are checkdowns and things like that, and people rallying up to try to cover him and try to get a hat on him. But if he is healthy, maybe he is, and maybe they're just playing cat and mouse games with him and opting not to do it. I wouldn't put anything past Brenke and this coaching staff as far as the trying to play tricks here. So Haynes King is your number one. How healthy is that throwing shoulder? If he can throw the ball down the field, then I think that unlocks a whole new level of potential in this game. Malik Rutherford is another one to keep an eye on, the wide receiver. He's a very important piece in this machine. Like, he's the guy who's kind of shooting down the field as your X receiver. Big play guy, very, very much so. Bailey Stockton's kind of stepped into that role a little bit. He has a good relationship with Aaron Philo. They actually played together in high school at Prince Avenue Christian. And then on the defensive side, Kyle Eifert is the guy who I'm looking at specifically. How healthy is he? He's been kind of in and out. He's been playing games, but he hasn't been the 3-down linebacker that we've come to know. He's been getting a little bit more rest here and there. And how healthy is he? Those are the 3 guys that I'm specifically looking at.
All right, looking at this matchup, let's say this goes well for Georgia Tech. Let's say they at least hang around, maybe have a chance to win. What do you think has gone right for Georgia Tech? What is it that the Yellow Jackets will have to accomplish if they want to make this thing interesting?
Well, I want to be clear. Like, this is a team that they were in that game last year. Like, this is a team that absolutely believes it can win this football game. And last year, I mean, it was, I want to say 8 points or something. It was a 1-score game when it was all said and done. Yes, Georgia Tech scored late, but they were very much in it. And that has given them some confidence coming into this game. But ultimately, if they're going to be hanging around and if they have a chance to win this game, it's because they were running the ball well. And I look at that 180-yard threshold, right? I think they're 15 or 16-2 or 16-3 or something like that when they hit that threshold, right? If you hit 180 yards, you have a good shot of winning the game. Can they do that against this Georgia front? That's the biggest question. UMass was able to do it. And obviously there's no transitive property in college football. So much changes week to week. But if they're able to run the ball effectively on offense, that unlocks everything. Because then those guys start running down the field, and then you start opening up the rest of this offense. They want to run to pass. On the defensive side, if you can turn Carson back over a few times, he's had ups and downs, of course. He's been better here as of late. He's been playing a lot cleaner football, especially over the last 2 weeks. That Tennessee game especially, he was fantastic. But if you can get him to revert back to maybe what he did against Ole Miss or what he did against Alabama, of course, you're not going to be able to get the pressure that those teams were. But you're going to be around and look, if you force a mistake or two, maybe just take advantage of it, And and then the last thing, finishing drives. That was something that they didn't do a super good job of against NC State. They were settling for field goals on after successful drives instead of finishing with 6 points. This is a game, and this is a team that you cannot afford to do that against.
All right, looking to how this thing actually plays out, Garrett, what do you think we see on Friday night? And if you want to, give me a score prediction.
So this is an interesting game because it's a rivalry game and you kind of throw records out the window. This was a team or a game that, I know, 15 years ago when Georgia Tech was riding high with Paul Johnson in the early years and Georgia was coming in here. I think it was like Joe Cox was the starting quarterback, and it was at Bobby Dodd Stadium. And Georgia Tech it was like a top 10 team in America, and Georgia was not very good. Georgia came in here and ran for, 250, 300 yards in that game, and they won. And that's sort of the point here. This Georgia Tech team would love to be what that team was. Throw a wrench into it, do something bad, and just muck it up. As far as outcomes are concerned, but I'm saying like that, you just throw your records out the window. Everything else changes when these two teams play each other. But as far as the way this game actually transpires, I think the path to a victory is very, very difficult. You played your best game of the season against Miami. It's going to take that, and I think it's going to take a little bit more because this defense is significantly better than what you saw against Miami. That was a very soft defense. Especially in run defense. Their run defense is not very good. You're not going to run for 271 yards on this Georgia defense. I'd be very hard-pressed to believe that. I think if you can get potentially up in the range of the high hundreds, then you have a good opportunity to win. But I just have a hard time believing you're going to get up into the deep into the 200s. It's just I really don't think that that's going to happen. You got to hit your passes. You got to play clean football on offense and defense. You've got to get some of those takeaways. You have to win the takeaway battle. If you lose the turnover battle, it's over. You're not going to win this game in a hostile environment. But if you can win the turnover battle and you can run the ball effectively, then that's the path to a win. I don't think that happens, though. I think Georgia Tech hangs around. They're not going to cover the spread. Let me tell you that much. Georgia's not dumping 21, whatever the spread is, 3 touchdowns or more. Kirby Smart doesn't do a very good job of that. That's actually the one detriment that he has had. He doesn't care about Vegas, and he's going to go get a win, and then he's going to lean and squeeze the air out of a football. But I don't think they cover the spread. I think that this game is going to be tight heading into the third, fourth quarter. I think Georgia's going to pull away when it's all said and done. But don't be surprised if this game is 7 to 10 points. I think that's really where it lands. As far as scores go, maybe like a 31 to 24 type of game. That's kind of what I see.
Not very far off, Garrett, of what I have. I've got Georgia 31-17. I'm with you. I don't think Georgia's going to cover that spread. I think for the defense, probably the best thing that happened was they didn't play very well against UMass, because I'm sure they've heard about it all week on a short week. So I think they're going to come in motivated. Not convinced that Georgia Tech's defense is going to be able to stop Georgia enough. I think you'll see Aaron Philo make some plays. I think basically that we're going to go into this halftime and Georgia will probably have like a 4-point lead or a 7-point lead. And you're kind of going, this thing's not over. And Georgia gets some momentum in the third quarter and builds just a big enough lead where as this game winds down that it's pretty clear that Georgia's going to win. But I've got Georgia by 2 touchdowns. Ben Wolk has got Georgia 49-13. And Kip Adams has Georgia 42-17. So you and I have this thing being a little bit closer. The short week, the rivalry, how much it means for Tech. I don't see Tech pulling off the upset in Athens, but I think they're going to keep it close for a majority of the game.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see. I mean, trust me. I mean, Aaron Philo and company, that would be an unbelievable performance. And I think they've got something in them to where they can make this game ugly. But ultimately, I tend to agree with you. Wouldn't be surprised if they can get. So think about it this way. I don't know if you watch Josh Pate on YouTube, and he does a fantastic job. But he's in recent weeks he's been talking about, like, in your head, like, what number do you think that the underdog would have to reach in order to potentially spring an upset? I think for the Georgia Tech in this game, that number's 30. You need to get around that kind of threshold. And then if they get to that 30, of course, that's an arbitrary made-up number. That's just the number that pops into my head. But what's that number for you in your head?
I would say probably like 28. Like a touchdown a quarter would probably put Georgia Tech in a spot where you're like, oh, they really have a chance.
Yeah, I think that's about right. So we're very much in the same mindset heading into this game. They've got a chance. They've got a shot. And if you can make it ugly and complete a couple passes and stay efficient and clean on offense, then Georgia Tech will be in this football game. They'll have an opportunity to win. We'll see what Georgia can do in that fourth quarter.
We have seen in college football this year that you can't count on anything. Weird things happen every single week, and we've gotten toward the end of the season. It feels like it's gotten crazier. So I think it's definitely going to be something to watch. Garrett, I appreciate you popping on. I want to give you the opportunity, plug what you got going on at gojackets.com, everything you guys are working on, getting ready for this big game.
Yeah, I mean, look, talk about the success that Brent Key has been having here in recent weeks. They flipped the Buford wide receiver earlier this week. You've got I think this is the best recruiting class that Georgia Tech has ever had. The program is one on the rise, and let me tell you what, if they can go get a win in Athens on Friday night, almost said Saturday, almost did it again, on Friday night, then let me tell you what, then there's even more to cover. But look, this is the best recruiting class in Georgia Tech history, and gojackets.com, we've got everything that you could possibly need in terms of coverage in the recruiting level, and then we're going to be talking a lot of football too. This team's going to back-to-back bowl games for the first time in a decade. They're a winning record for the first time in a decade. Everything is up with them, which means lots more content to get into and lots more positive content to cover. So transfer portal is going to be very interesting. We've got all that stuff coming up. National Signing Day, like you mentioned, that early window is coming up next week, and a lot of these Georgia Tech kids here, there's a couple kids that could be a potential flip. With one in particular. So make sure you get a subscription. We have the Black Friday deals like Jordan so kindly mentioned. It's also going on. You can get your coverage here from GoJackets.com. So keep an eye out for a potential flip. It could be here in the next week or so. So that could be a lot of fun. But Georgia Tech's doing a lot of big things, so make sure you head on over and get all that coverage.
What a great plug by Garrett. And yeah, 23 commits to this point, number 18 class in the 2025 cycle. You got 5-star Josh Petty, offensive lineman. Tay Harris, a guy that Georgia fans may remember, was at one point committed to the Bulldogs, DB that flipped not that long ago to Georgia Tech. Now, Garrett, before I get out of here, a lot of folks are probably going to be listening to this on Thanksgiving. So hit me with what is the thing you have to eat on Thanksgiving, whether it's a main dish, a side dish, something that you have got to have when the family sits down.
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, no, because it changes. I think it changes. I'm going to say mac and cheese. I need some good mac and cheese. I could go mashed potatoes. I can go stuffing maybe. But no, it's going to be mac and cheese for me this year. That's kind of how I'm feeling. I kind of ebb and flow. I ebb and flow throughout the years, but it changes every year seemingly. But no, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving. And this game's going to be fantastic on Friday. What's your side? What you got?
It's got to be sweet potato souffle. I mean, it might as well be a dessert, but I don't
Southern.
care.
That's Southern. I love it.
Just got to lean into it. That's all you got to do. Well, we'll wrap it up right there. Again, Garrett, I appreciate the time. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Be sure to subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast where you get your podcast. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think. Subscribe to Dogs 24/7 to GoJackets.com. As we mentioned, we got this Black Friday sale going on, 75% off. Get ready for a Black Friday football game with the Black Friday sale. It makes sense to me. Subscribe to the Dogs 24/7 YouTube, the TikTok, all kinds of good content out there. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope you guys have a chance to spend it with friends and family. Get ready for some good football on Turkey Day and then in the days to come. And we will obviously be on hand Friday night between the hedges for another edition of Clean Old Fashioned Hate. So for Garrett Chapman, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.